last session we discussed like some of the basic services of AWS, right? Lambda, EC2, S3 bucket, databases likewise. So now today we are going to combine all those things together and create an application using a framework called Amplify Gen 2, right? Uh, Before getting into Amplify Gen 2, let's discuss a bit why such a framework is there, right? So uh, I hope you guys have logged into or created the AWS account and like seen AWS console and services, right? So if I ask you a question, how you guys are creating an AWS service? කොහොමද AWS service එක create කරන්න ඔයාලා? Give me some answers. කොහොමද AWS service එක create කරන්නේ? console එක දැකලා තියෙන්නේ කවුද AWS? log වෙලා කවුරුවත් නැද්ද? අයිනක් දී service එක create කරන්න බෑනේ. Right. So AWS console එකට ගියොත් අපි so there are like let me change my screen and show you. Yeah, so if you go to AWS console, these are like some of the recently visited services from my account. So you can just go to a service. And there are buttons like this for every service to create a new function, new database, so things like that. You can go to this form, fill out these details, and click create. It will create a resource, right? This fine for like a small scale project or few services, that's fine, right? So what if now you have to like scale up your application? Now things like Lambda functions are, you need Lambda functions, you need databases, you need queues, you need notification services, like the number of services are going up as your application and requirements scale, right? And you need to maintain several environments. So there can be your local environment, and there can be a test environment, and you need a production environment, right? So you need to provision all these resources in all these three environments, right? So in such situations, if you follow this console approach, what will happen? You need to remember exact configurations you have done for each service and replicate it 3 times. Maybe if you have like 10 developers, both 10 developers might have to provision those in their local environment, right? So to tackle this issue, frameworks like Amplify Gen 2 was introduced. So before Amplify Gen 2, there was CloudFormation, serverless framework, PullMe. There were frameworks like that. So CloudFormation is still there, and Terraform, I think you guys have heard. So these frameworks allows you to define those resources using specific languages uh, like TypeScript. So Amplify Gen 2 support TypeScript. But if we go to Terraform, they have this language called HCL. And if we go to serverless, they have a YML to define those resources, right? So once you define resources using the code, when you run that, it will automatically create all the resources in the environment you define. So in Amplify Gen 2, you can define them using, you can define them using TypeScript, and under the hood, it will create a CloudFormation stack for your services. So if you want to delete, you can delete the entire stack. And if you want to provision it again, you just have to run one command and it will create all the resources. It can be 1,000 resources, no matter. It will create the number of resources you need exactly equal in each environment, right? Environment 100ක් තිබ්බත් 100ම එකම විදියට හදනවා මේ වගේ framework එකක් use කරද්දී. Right? So why Amplify Gen 2? We chose Amplify Gen 2 because it has like several, like most of the guys are familiar with TypeScript. When it comes to front-end JavaScript, you guys are familiar, right? So with Amplify Gen 2, you can create a single project with both front-end and back-end connected. So it supports Angular, Next.js, React, uh, White. So a lot of frameworks. It supports front-end framework. So when you create an Amplify Gen 2 project, you will get the front-end code, and in the same code base, you will get your back-end code as well, right? So there is a file called like this backend TS file. So you can define all your resources in a single file. So these are a bit complex. So Lakindu will get into a small code for you. So there is a single define all your resources. As the project grows, create it to different files. So all in TypeScript, a language you are familiar with, right? And it's built on AWS. It's a wrapper. So I don't think you guys have heard with about AWS CDK, but it's a library that allows you to create AWS resources, right? So Amplify Gen 2 abstract its so it has some wrapper functions. So if we need to create a function, it has defined function. If you need to create a storage, it has defined storage. Likewise, so but the functionalities of Amplify can be limited when your project increases complexity, when your project grows. Uh, there can be features that Amplify does not support. But since it's built on AWS CDK, you can extend it with CDK constructors and complete your work. Yes. So one other feature is in Amplify, it's like it has this sandbox concept. So if you have 10 developers in your team, and if you have like one Lambda function, one local environment for all you guys in the cloud. So if you guys sharing a one database or one Lambda function, if one developer makes a change and deploy it, others will also have to live with that change, right? So එක function එකක් නම් developer team එකම share කරගන්නේ එක්කෙනෙක් change එකක් කරොත් අනිත් අයටත් ඒක effect වෙනවා, right? So to handle that, Amplify has this concept of sandboxes. So if I run my Amplify project locally, it will create a whole new set of services just for myself in our AWS account. And if Lakindu runs his local environment, it will create a fresh set of services for Lakindu. So each individual will get a separate and localized services, set of services for themselves, and changes they do will not affect others, right? So that's the simplicity of Amplify. So yeah, so it by default it supports user authentication through Cognito, and it supports both GraphQL and REST APIs, and it can be like it directly supports AWS Lambda, SQS, uh, and S3 bucket creation and databases. So those are like basic services you need for a web application. You can easily plug those services, and most importantly, when it comes to new AI services, Amplify has this AI conversation components just built for you. So if you are working with React application, they have React components that you can use as AI chat. You can just include that in your application and connect a Bedrock agent. So it will like an intelligent agent for you guys. So all these basic features are there. And if we take like a basic structure, so this backend file is where all the backend code is getting connected, and then you can divide it like functions, storage, models, auth. Uh, those four are the main areas that Amplify supports, and if you need to extend it, you can write custom CDK queries. So uh, I will not go into any detailed details here. So Lakindu will take over on that.
All right. So in order for this to work, do you all have like an AWS account that you all can work with? And anyone who has an AWS account? Okay. So we'll have to start with that. All right. Okay. So now you all could. This is okay. All right. We'll get to that in a bit then. Okay. So today we are going to be like taking a look at how you can essentially build an application with Amplify Gen 2. So I myself learned this whole framework in like a week. So I didn't have like a lot of I had no experience in this framework before. So what I essentially did was just read the documentation and built this from scratch. So it took me like one day to build this. So that's how easy this particular tool is. So I think it might be the same for you all as well. All right. So if you do have like a chance that you all can scan the QR code, so that's a sample app that I've deployed. But the thing is, I just realized that it's not mobile responsive at all. So if you all open it on your phone, it won't work at all. So what I'll do is I'll just show it like this. So this is essentially an application that was built purely using a Gen 2 only. So Wi-Fi is incredibly slow, right? Let me try to connect to my hotspot. Okay. So today, what we are essentially going to be building is a platform like this. So it's essentially a simple note-taking app. So what you can do is you can create an account. And when you create an account, so essentially, I don't want to read your notes, and you don't want to read my notes. So we are going to build some system like that, which essentially lets you create a sample note. And it's going to save that on the database, and once you reload, it's going to fetch it through an API, and then you can click on the node and you can make some changes to it. So all of this is purely through Amplify Gen 2, all the backend functionality that we have worked on here. So essentially that's what we're going to be working on, and I'm also going to be showing you all how you can upload photos. So like if you want to upload a profile picture for your profile, so you can just long click on this, and you can maybe just go ahead and upload a profile picture like that. And that will essentially save that on the database, and the next time you load, it should probably show it. Okay, it did not. Maybe because of the Wi-Fi though, but yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that when we check it out. That's fine. Okay. So that's essentially the platform that we are going to be working with. So while I go through these slides, if you all can kind of go on the AWS console and create an account, that would be great, because then we don't have to spend a lot of time setting up AWS accounts. So if you all can create an account, then I can show you all how to get started with the rest of the way. So I'm Lakindu, and I'm a technical lead at Search Global, and I'm also an AWS certified solutions architect, and I'm an AWS community builder, and in my free time, I'm a technical writer. If you want to connect with me, just go ahead and scan the QR code, and that will take you to my LinkedIn, where you can drop me any message that you want or any questions that you have, and I'll be happy to get back to you. So that's if you want to connect. So I think Shamira basically covered this slide. So what is Amplify Gen 2? It's essentially a platform which helps you build applications faster, all through programming code. So you can have languages like TypeScript to help you define your infrastructure easily. So does anyone know what TypeScript is? Have you all worked with TypeScript or JavaScript? Raise of hands, guys. JavaScript or TypeScript? Both. Okay, both. Okay. Okay, cool. So essentially, if you know TypeScript, that makes our job a whole lot easier. So that's essentially good. So earlier, back in those days, so like when I first started working with Amplify, you had a bunch of CLI commands like this that you see. So you'd have to, if you want to add authentication to your system, you'd essentially open your terminal and you write amplify add auth. And then once that'll do is that'll take you through a whole CLI process. And in that you will configure if you want to log in with email, what's the maximum password length, and if you want to enable social logins. So stuff like that you can configure. And after you have configured, all you have to do is run amplify push. And what that will do is that will sync all of your changes to the cloud that you have essentially customized. And then that will create a JSON file called a config, which you can configure on your front end application. That that was problematic because I never really remembered how all of these commands, and you can't extend anything. So let's say that Amplify only used to support a particular set of services like authentication, one database, one storage service, so stuff like that. So because of that, you couldn't really extend and create complex applications. So those days it was mainly used as a POCing tool, like a prototyping tool if you want to. But when Gen 2 came out, you can basically define anything that you want. So all you have to do is, it's just a small JavaScript function called define auth, and you can just say login with email. So same thing that we did here with the CLI, but now we are coding it out. And this essentially creates a cloud formation stack. So I'll show you what a sample stack looks like. So you can extend off of it and create custom resources that are not supported by Amplify as well. So that's mainly why I also started taking an interest onto Gen 2, because up until then I did not really like using that framework at all. So this really changed my perspective on it. So with Gen 2, it's still good for rapid prototyping and for a POC. And if you're building small scale production applications, now I haven't tested this out on a really big and complex enterprise workload, but I have found that it might be useful for production apps, but I think Shamira can add more to it because he's had more experience working with Gen 2 than I have. Uh, okay, so essentially what we are going to be doing today is we are going to do a quick analysis of what we want to build, and we are going to demonstrate, refine. So essentially it's going to build. So first we are going to build what we want, and then we are going to demonstrate it, and we are going to refine it. So that's essentially what we are going to do. And then, so we are going to do up until this particular phase today. Testing will be naturally doing it. And once we do the testing, you all will be able to further take this out and implement this in a way that you all want to do it. So this is, so all of you are familiar with waterfall, agile. So this is another project management or software development methodology called rapid application development. So essentially how that works is you take in your requirements, you build, demonstrate, and then refine based on feedback. And then at that point, you do your entire prototyping, and afterwards you go on to testing phase. And finally, you build your application properly, like after your POC has approved. So essentially, this is like your POC kind of level, like a proof of concept. So that's what we are going to be doing today. So I don't know if you can see the diagram properly. You can see it, right? You can see it, right? Awesome. Okay. Okay. So now, what are we building today? So essentially, we're going to be building an authentication service which will help you kind of create an account and log in with an email and a password combination. So have you all used or built any applications which you can log into? Raise of hands. Have you all built applications which capture the user's information? So how do you generally build it if I ask you that question? Do you all have a database called users, and do you all have a password field with a hash value of the password? That's essentially how you do it, right? So when you go into the industry, you will realize that approach is not widely accepted, because if you go deeper into hashes, hashes have a common flaw where sometimes different values can have the same hash. You all know that, right? So because of that, you don't typically build an authentication service on your own. There are so many different services. So have you all used Firebase? Have you all used Firebase Auth? Raise of hands. Okay, one person. Okay. Anyone else? Two. Anyone else? Okay, two people have used Firebase Auth. Okay. So essentially what you do is you define, essentially if you want to create a user, you just call that function. And when you log in, you just pass in the login credentials and it does it for you, right? So that's essentially what AWS provides as well. So this is known as Cognito. So that's essentially your authentication service in AWS for customer facing applications. App is gonna be our API. So I think all of you all are familiar with REST APIs, right? Have you all heard of GraphQL? So if I can ask anyone, what does GraphQL mean? Does anyone wanna give a guess on why we use GraphQL over REST APIs? Anyone? Okay. Okay. I'll have to answer at some point, you know. Like it's supposed to be fun. It's interactive, okay? So essentially, REST APIs return the payload regardless of whether you want it or not. So let's say you have a endpoint which will return all of the users in your API, in your database. So when the user's endpoint is called, essentially it will go to the database and get all the users. So imagine you're using this endpoint in 6 or 7 different places. Sometimes all of these places might not have what you really want, right? Like some places might use all of the information, while some might use only part of it. So in that particular case, REST APIs can get expensive. Like when you go to the production applications, you get billed for the payloads that you pass through. So in that particular case, people have implemented graph queries or using query languages where when you call the API, you can tell what attributes you want directly from the client. So then it goes, the GraphQL, once you send the query, there's a resolver. And after it resolves, in the resolver, it will be tell, I want these attributes only and nothing else. So you can use the GraphQL in hundreds of places, but the payloads will not be the same at any given point in time because it returns only what you want. So we are going to be using a GraphQL API because I think it's important that you know, because everyone is familiar with building REST API. We'll take a look at how you can build a GraphQL API as well today. And we are going to have a storage bucket. So how do you all generally store images? Now I'll ask a question. How do you all store images when you all build applications? Like you all have profile pictures. If you all are building an image service, you all have images that people upload. Where do you all generally store this? Do you all store it as blobs in your database, like large binary objects? Do you all do that? Okay, you don't. Okay. Do you generally use a third-party service like Cloudinary or Firebase storage? Yeah. So essentially, that's what S3 does. S3 is Amazon's storage service. So it helps you store large objects and fetch them back at a fraction of the cost than how it might cost in storing in a database. So this is gonna be our database, DynamoDB. So you all have used SQL, right? MySQL, Postgres. Have you all used MongoDB? So think of this similar to a MongoDB Atlas or database, but instead of collections, you have a table, and in the table you have a key value pair. Essentially, a key is an ID, a unique ID for the table, like your primary key. So in DynamoDB, we call that as the partition key. And then you have a separate key called a range key or something like a sort key. So something, if you want to sort data, you would have a sort key. So that's essentially how this table structure is. And we are going to have a lambda function as well. So a lambda function is essentially, now when you build an Express.js server, when you have some kind of handler to your API route, right? So you would have like app.get, and you have the route, and then you have a handler function which will essentially take the request and you perform your operation and return, right? You all know how Express apps work, right? So if I quickly show you, so if you take this one, so here there's a route, and in the after the route you have a request handler. So this is what you call as a handler, where you have the incoming request and the response that's about to be served. So a lambda function is, think of one whole route as a separate deployed service. So this is not in the same server that you're running. So if you're running Express, you have thousands of routes, but they're all bundled into one server. Think of this as its own isolated server on its own. So I'll show you how that works. So if, for example, if we go on to the AWS console, let's see if I can load it. Do you all like have another Wi-Fi I can connect to by any chance? Connect it again and see. is a good time to create your accounts as well with me. So why don't you all, okay, we'll do it together then. So why don't you all go on to this? Just go to this first page. You all can take out your laptops. So this is gonna be a very hands-on session with me today. So it's not just about you listening in. So you're gonna be doing this with me as well. Yeah, I'll give you all like a couple of minutes to set up your laptops. Okay, so once you all go on to your AWS console, just click on sign in if you all can. And once you all click on that, it will be taking you all to the sign up or sign in page. And from there, you all can click on, there's a button sign up at the bottom of the screen. So you all can just click on that. Let's give it a while to load. Okay. So you all can create a new AWS account from this particular step. Okay. So go ahead and just sign yourselves up onto this. In the meantime, I'll just go and log it back into my account. So make sure you all create an email address, have an email, and then have an account name. So account name, just give your name. That's totally fine. You can do anything you want with the name. So just do that and click verify, and that will take you to the verification page. And y'all will have to provide a debit card or a credit card. So don't worry because it won't charge you for that. They'll just do like $1 transaction and then immediately debit it back, credit it back onto your account because they just want to make sure your card is working. So we are not gonna be provisioning anything which is gonna be costly. It's all gonna be free today, but this is just as a measure for AWS, just to know that if something goes wrong, they know where to charge you. But we won't be provisioning anything that's gonna be costing. So we'll be taking down every environment that we built today as well. So just make sure you all do that. Okay, so I'll just go back and sign in. Okay. All right. So once you all are in your AWS account, okay, so some have already created an account. Okay. So for those who have created your accounts, we'll all provision a Lambda function then. So do you want me to wait until the stream is set up? Okay. All right. Okay. So just go on and we'll go create a Lambda function just to test things out. So so the best thing about Lambda is you don't have to like think about what you're building. Like you don't have to think about your server. You don't have to think about what libraries do I need to install to spin up this server. Like how do I manage it? How do I invoke it through an API? So it's very easy. So I'll just create a sample function from scratch. So we'll just call this like hello world then, and we'll just create a function. So over here, you can essentially have any type of logic that you want. So once you go to your code, so this is automatically open up your code editor. So what you can do is, once you see the code here, it will load in a bit. So it's going to open up something similar to VS Code directly on your browser. So what you can do is essentially, let's say you want to have like message maybe. So let's say we want to have like sample message. We can call this like hello world, and then you might just deploy a lambda function. So any message that you want, you can just type it, and then what you can do is you can just replace this on your response body. So let's say we have a sample message, and you can save it, and once you go to save, and you can just deploy it. So immediately when you deploy it, Lambda will automatically take your code and upload it on the Lambda service, and now it has updated the function. So now it's as simple as, so if you go to, if I can remember this well, go to function URL from your configuration, and then if you create a function URL and with, let's choose no auth for now, because we are going to be adding auth later on. I'll show you how to do that. So right now, just to show how this works. So now you have a function URL. You can copy this, and once you go there, it'll show that. So that's your server, right? So you didn't take care of any server, you didn't take care of any libraries, you didn't install any dependency, you didn't have to install Express.js, nothing. So it's as simple as just adding your business code. So that's why we mainly use Lambda functions, because you don't have to worry about provisioning all of the hardware behind it. Just take care of your business logic. So you might have a simple database query that's happening there. So that's what Lambda does. So once you are done with it, so good thing is, again, you don't pay for idle here. You only pay for what you use. So now if I go here, now if I go to this monitor here, and if I go to my logs, I'll show you exactly how much time we are going to be paying for. So okay, might take a bit. Okay, while that's loading, let's jump back to the slides. So yeah, so that's essentially what a Lambda function is. So what we are gonna be doing is, now this Cognito, this one, even though it is our identity provider, what this will do is it will only store the username and the password. It won't store anything else. So that is why, so we need to have some kind of table to query our users from, right? So that is where we have a trigger here. So this trigger, what it essentially means is the Cognito service, when it creates a user, it will immediately fire an event. So event is like when something is done, it will invoke something. So for example, an event could be it is very cold inside, and the trigger for that could be I'm gonna go and turn off the AC now. So similarly, the user can be registered, and then as a result, we have a Lambda function which will store all of these user information. in the users table. So that's essentially what we are going to be building. So with that, we have a users directory, and we have a nodes table that is going to have be exposed through a GraphQL API, and essentially everything is managed using Amplify. So it's as simple as that. So hosting to everything is going to be done through Amplify. So I walked you through all of the services. So essentially Cognito, it provides, that's what we call as like a directory of users. And it supports federation. Like if you want to have single sign-on, it supports features like that. It works with JWT. So you all have you know what a JWT token is, right? You all know what JWT is? Okay, cool. So that's what that is. And it's scalable, so it handles all of your scaling. If you have one user today and like 10 million users tomorrow, it won't throttle or it won't have any kind of downtime. And AppSync, again, it's GraphQL. That's why we are mainly using it. You have simplified resolvers. Essentially, directly, it can hook up to a database DynamoDB without any man-in-the-middle integrations. And mainly, what we are using it for is its security integrations. So AppSync can directly integrate with Cognito. So as you can see in the diagram below, so this Amplify authenticates with identity provider. But what I have didn't mention here is AppSync will talk to identity provider and check if this JWT token is valid. So it takes care of that automatically. We don't have to take care of that at all. And that's essentially one other reason. And AppSync has native support, like REST APIs do as well, but with AppSync, it's very easy to build real-time applications. So if you have, let's say, like a WebSocket that you want to have to build a chat application, it handles that with just a few lines of code, like maybe maximum 5 to 6 lines of code, and you can build a real-time chat application as well with chat rooms and whatnot. So that's essentially why we are going with AppSync today. Lambda, again, I told you, serverless, you don't pay for anything unless you use it, and you don't pay for idle. And it is deeply integrated with AWS ecosystems. So like I told you, Cognito is one of the many use cases of Lambda. So for example, you might have another one. Now let's say, now all of y'all watch YouTube videos, right? So in YouTube, when you go to that uh, content quality, you can essentially choose the number of or the resolution that you want to play the video, right? You can choose 240, 360, 480, 1080, 4K, up to that, right? So how that technology works behind the scenes is they have an intermediary storage, they have a storage bucket. So you dump, let's say, an 8K file onto it. It handles this. So the 8K file is stored here. But behind the scenes, what happens is they invoke Lambda functions. So this is not exactly how YouTube works, but it's how YouTube can be implemented. So you have Lambda functions. As immediately when you upload it, it'll trigger an encoding Lambda function. So what this encoders, what it'll do is, it'll take these videos and it'll encode it in real time onto different formats. So have you all ever uploaded a YouTube video? Raise of hands. Anyone who has ever done it just to try how it works? So when you upload it, have you all noticed that certain formats are playable quicker than others? So 240 might be available first. Then it might be available, then you have 480. Then 1080 might become available. So immediately you can't view the 1080p file, 1080p format. So what that means is there are certain behind the scene operations where 240 it's encoded first. That's done. So that's available for the user to serve. And they'll upload that on a different storage file or maybe on a database with a link to the 240 file. Then you have the 480 format. The 480 will again encode, and once it's ready, it will be served to the user. So that's how this kind of technology works behind the scenes. It doesn't immediately serve it, but rather encodes it in different formats that you can consume it in. So that's another good use case of where you can use Lambda functions as well. Well, so DynamoDB, again, similar to MongoDB if you all have used it. And best part of that is you don't have to deal with any performance issues. So regardless, so you can run into very bad performance problems if you model it badly. But out of the box, DynamoDB can serve requests in under single digit milliseconds. So it might take, let's say, like 8 to 7 milliseconds for the database to query something and work. So that's mainly why I go with Dynamo, mainly because of its really fast performance times. So again, this is what we are going to be building. If you all want the GitHub code, you can just scan the QR and we can get started. So do you all want to scan the QR and go to the GitHub repo? So that's right there. So essentially that's all for my slide deck. So you all can either go with the QR code on the GitHub or we can build it from scratch, which is what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to build this entire thing from scratch. Not the UI because it took me, I didn't do it. AI did it for me, but the backend I'll do it for you and give. UI was not me at all. So we'll get to that. So okay, I want to show the pricing, no? So let's see if you can check the pricing out. Okay. So if you go to your logs, so you'll see we invoked one Lambda function. And now if you see, this has been invoked from 4:34 UTC time at 53 milliseconds. Okay, so it's not even, okay, so here, you have this duration, right? Particular duration called 3.13 milliseconds. I don't know if you can see it. Well, let me try to zoom in. So here, so we got billed for 4 milliseconds essentially. So if you take that into a pricing perspective, so now we are deployed on US East 1. And so let's say we have US East 1. So we select that from here. And so we went with we went with ARM, I believe. Our architecture was ARM. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's ARM. I configured it in ARM. Okay. So now you have duration for every GB per second. Okay. Here, this is the pricing that we want to take a look at. If you switch this to US East 1, so you will know that we configured it on, so you can check the memory that you configured it on. So we have configured it on 128 megabytes of memory. So with 128 megabytes, we pay this much per millisecond. So if you take this and multiply it by 4, okay, still less than $1. So it's about, I think, 8. So it's, you don't pay for it essentially. It's essentially free. So that's the best part about it. So you don't pay for this kind of record. You don't even notice your bill flying because again I can't even get a bill out of it. It still gives me $0. So but AWS will round it to about 8.4. So but that again it's less than like what 1 rupee for that. And all of this is free because it is already covered on your AWS free tier. So free tier has a X set number of milliseconds that you can invoke. So these are all covered under your free tier. So you don't pay for this at all. So again, that's the beauty of it. So after you're done, go ahead to your Lambda again and just delete it because now we expose the function URL with no authentication, which means anyone can publicly invoke it if they have access to the URL, which it's not a good thing because they can kind of DOS your Lambda and kind of give you a really high bill. So because Lambda will automatically scale and it won't stop scaling, so it'll kind of DOS you out. So you don't want to do that. So now, once you have created your AWS account, so hands up who has set up their account now? Just a raise of hands so I can like walk you through the next steps. Okay. I think some of you on this side had an account as well. Do you all need time to create an account? Or can I proceed? Okay, so I'll proceed then. So what you're going to be doing is essentially you're going to be going on to this service called Identity and Access Management. And what that will essentially do is it will help you create users or essentially a user which you can use to deploy things to your cloud locally. So what you are going to be doing is you can create a new user. So I'll create a sample user. And I'm not going to give access to the console. I just want to use it through my CLI. So I'll just attach policies directly. And when you attach policies, we'll just go with administrate access because that's easy, but I won't recommend that in a production environment. If you are building an actual production application, I won't recommend, because when you give administrate access, so if you take a look at what we just created, so essentially what this means is action all, resource all. So it can do anything on your AWS console, starting from spinning up EC2s, deleting EC2s, deleting databases. So it can do everything, so which we don't really want to give. But rather what we generally do is you can refine saying this user is allowed to only create Dynamo tables, invoke Lambda functions. So you can do fine tune on your IAM role like that. But for this purpose, we'll just go with admin because that's easy. If not, we'll have to spend a bunch of time analyzing permissions. So one thing afterwards, if you, let's say that after you create this role, you want to fine tune it, all you have to do is click on this button called generate policy. So what that will do is it will analyze all of the operations that you have performed on this role over the past 7 days, and it will create a policy that will only support those operations and not everything. So because this is a fresh user, we will not be able to do that right now. So once you create your role, head over to security credentials, and from there, create an access key. So from here, you can create it for the CLI access and click I understand. Next, and create your access key and just keep these stored, okay? So after that, you all will have to install a tool called AWS CLI, okay? So install. So once you all do that, head over to this particular site, and then, so if you are on Mac OS, just copy this particular command, and or you can install the package. If you all want to do curl onto it, you can just curl and install it. So why don't you all set up AWS? And after you all do that, you all can head over to the terminal, and from there, what you can do is you can just head over to AWS-V, and that will display your AWS version. So that will should not take this much of time, but I wonder why. Okay, so let's see. We'll just give it a few minutes and see. Okay, so now you can see maybe AWS version. I don't know the exact command. Okay, that's the one. So if you type AWS version, it will display your. Okay, interesting. What's the command for that? Okay, that's what I did. Okay, I didn't have the dash. Okay. Seems like it's not working, but either way, if you keep getting these errors saying don't run this command, instead run that command on AWS, that means you have installed your CLI. So we can get started. Okay. Wonder why that does not work, man. Okay, we'll check another command out. Dash dash version. Yeah, it's dash dash version. Okay. So that's the command. So it's dash dash version. So if you all do that, so I haven't upgraded my CLI in years, but maybe you all will have a different version. So have you all installed the CLI? And have you all created the IAM user? So I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. Okay. So now I have already set up my access key, so it might not look the same for you. So can you run AWS? Do you have CLI installed? See what it'll try. Run AWS configure. AWS configure. So now copy paste those values we done. That's now the secret. Was this a secret you pasted? Okay, then you might have to do it again. So run this and copy your access key. And now enter the secret. Region, put US dash in all in symbols. Dash east dash one. That leave it as default. Just click on enter. Once you have set up your AWS profile, so what you can do is copy these credentials that we just created, okay? Like this, and go ahead and paste all of your access keys. So if I type AWS configure, so you have your secret. So then just paste your secret also with what you just generated. Default region, just leave that as US dash east dash one. So that will point everything towards the initial region that we built. So anything provisioning from that CLI will go on to that particular region. Output, you can leave it as none or have a JSON. So whatever you prefer, you can keep it. And that's essentially it for configuring your AWS account. So once you are done with that, we are ready to start coding now. Yeah. Always allow? No. Okay, now can they see? Maybe I have to reshare it. No? Okay, okay. So do you want me to I should show that again? Okay. So just to show that for anyone who's watching online. So run AWS configure and you'll see your access key ID. So just paste the IAM access key ID that we just created, essentially this access key ID. And then once you enter, provide your secret, copy this and paste it. Default region, leave that as US East 1. Default output format, leave it as JSON or as the default one as none, that's fine. And then you are configured with your AWS account. And that's pretty much it. So next up, what we will do is we'll create a new Next.js project, okay? So I'm gonna be working with Next because I'm very familiar with Next, but do you all have a framework that you all prefer? Do you all want to do React or Next? Or do Next.js? All of you all want to do Next? Huh? React. Okay. Who says React? Hands up. Okay. How about anyone else? Majority, what do you all prefer? Huh? Next. Okay, cool. Next.js it is. Okay, so I'm just gonna create a new project called I don't know. We'll call it as notes. So we'll. Okay, I don't have to do that, no? Okay, I'll just. Okay, I don't have to do the Next.js automatic creates a directory. Okay. So next app. Okay. So we'll install a new Next application. They can hear me if I leave the mic down. Okay, cool. Okay. So then what you can do is you can copy this command and just create a new app. So I'm gonna call mine as notes1 because I already created a folder called notes. So I'm just gonna call this as notes1. And I'm gonna use TypeScript, ESLint, yes. Tailwind, I'm not gonna use Tailwind because I'm gonna be showing you all MUI. So I'm gonna be using the source directory. And are you all familiar with the app router or the pages? App, okay. Who is not familiar with app router? Only, okay. Is everyone familiar with the app router? Okay, cool. Okay, we'll go with the app router and see. Would you like to use the app router? Yes. Would you like to use Turbo Pack? Yes. We're gonna have an alias, so we'll have it like star maybe. We'll just have it like an and. Why is that? Okay. Okay. So now we are gonna install that. So so I did not build any of my previous components to run on server. So we'll all use client-side generation today. So since you all wanted it on app route, I'll be doing it because I actually did it on pages, but that's fine. So we'll switch to app route on this. So maybe I can do is until this installs, I'll just head over to the source code that I already have. Why is it? Okay, this one. Okay. So package.json. So what I have essentially is I'm going to be using a design system called MUI. Have you all heard of MUI before? Okay. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using MUI here. So essentially all I did was I went over to my MUI side, and from here what I essentially did was you click on discover the core libraries, and I believe you head over to docs, material UI, and go to installation, and just copy these 3 commands. That's all. That's all what I did. I just copied it and I ran it. So you all can also copy it and run it on your project now. So, and we'll build up the front end a bit. And next up, so this is still installing, so I think I might have time to switch over to this. Once you install this, you all will have all of your emotion dependencies and all of your MUI dependencies as well. Okay. Uh, Now, after you set up your front end with the libraries that we want, we'll first take a look at configuring Amplify, okay? So Amplify is the most interesting part about this. Front end, I mean anyone can build it now. So Amplify is what we're really here for. So I'll head over to my Amplify Gen 2 documentation. The documentation is really helpful. So what you can essentially do is now we are going to install it. So essentially what we did was we did first step already. So we configured. Okay, I don't think it's going to let me load it because this is doing it in parallel. But so now we essentially did this entire process where we created an IAM user, but it's going to be doing it in a really different way. It's going to be using a new service called Identity Center, which we're not going to be using. So we did this first step. So we installed the AWS CLI and we ran AWS configure, and we added the account information with the secret keys, and we have added everything. So now what we are going to be doing is adding Amplify onto our project. Okay. So this is still going. So now we are porting Amplify onto an existing project. So we can't do this because this will create an empty project with Amplify. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be going with the manual setup. It's more fun when you do it using the manual setup. So what we are going to be doing is just copy this particular command set and paste it on your particular uh, project. So can we all take a second to do that? Like I would want to show it, but mine is still configuring everything. So I'll not have time to show that. So can you all just set the project up and do it? Am I going too fast, by the way? A bit fast. Okay, I'll slow down. Okay. I'll give you all some time. So do you all want me to repeat any steps again? All good? Okay. If you all want me to repeat step, just let me know. So I'll give you all like maybe 5 minutes to kind of get to where I am. Okay, I all back. I all back onto this particular page. I all on MUI yet? Okay. Okay. So I'll have to anyways wait until this is done. Okay. Maybe if you all have the project set up, what you all can do is, can you all copy this command, head over to your Amplify Gen 2 documentation, and just click on, switch to Next.js from here, and then just why don't you all copy this particular command. So it's right under manual installation. Just copy this command and install it if you all have the project set up already. So what that will do is, so what this command will essentially do is, so I'll maybe install it on my existing project. So what that will do is, it will install this backend file or this library backend and the backend CLI, and it will also help configure TypeScript if you have not, but we have already installed it. So that won't may play much of a difference here. So okay. So once you all install that, you all will essentially have to configure the backend afterwards. So that's essentially what we're doing now. So what I will show you is, okay. So maybe we can speed things up. Maybe I won't run the front end just yet. Instead, what I will do is, maybe what I can do is, so you all follow the Next.js approach, and I'll try to show you all how to spin up the Amplify part. So I'm just gonna do what you all might initially do when you set up the next project. So I essentially have an empty package.json file now. So for that, what I will be doing is I'll add Amplify to that now. So I'll switch my ID on this one. So what I'll do is I'll add Amplify onto that and see if maybe that is a bit faster. Okay, either way, until that goes, I'll show you what we're going to be building. So once you have installed, you all will have to create a file called backend.ts. So essentially, that's going to be the place where your infrastructure is going to be hosted on. So if you open up this backend.ts, initially you all will have something like this, maybe something like this. So you all have to define that. So if you all can, if you all have installed everything, could you all just add a folder called Amplify on your next project? And could you all add a backend.ts file? And could you all just call this function called define backend? But do not add any of these, just leave it empty. Okay? So just leave it empty. This is still going. So just leave it empty. So essentially it will look like this. The backend file will look something like this now. Okay? It will look exactly like that. Okay? This is what you should have. So what when you do this, it essentially hooks up your project to the AWS cloud and creates an environment which you can interact with. That's what that whole configuration does. It just creates a backend, like an API for you, and leaves it for you properly. That's all. From that, you have a fully functioning backend. Now, next, all you need to do is define a database, define your authentication, and you're good to go. So, once you want to do that, what you can do is you can do npx, ampx. So that's essentially how you call Amplify on your CLI, and then just run sandbox. So what that will do is it will bootstrap an empty backend for you and leave it. So now you can see it's synthesizing a backend and it's running my type check. So it does type checks to validate if my infrastructure is all correct. So now it's essentially building an empty application. So maybe I think that approach is better than going with this one. So maybe we can cancel this off. We can let this publish. Okay. Now, while this is going on, next up, when this publishes, it will essentially publish a CloudFormation stack for you. So if you head over to your AWS console and go to the region where you set it to, so I'll head over to my CloudFormation now. And if you switch to the view, so I'm already on US East one, so I don't have to switch. And once you see, so now it's deploying a stack for me, right? So it does that automatically. So now once you go to your CloudFormation, you'll see that it's deploying a CloudFormation stack. And the best part is this is all for you. So it's not like we are all working on the same environment. You will have your own environment, I will have my own environment. That's how that works. So each of us gets a change. So if you do a change, that won't be reflected on mine, vice versa. So it helps you develop in an isolated environment. Now, next up, we'll have to define our authentication file. We want people to log in, right? So now, if we go to our diagram, we have set this part up. This amplify part is now done, okay? This is done. So next up, why don't we take a look at creating the identity provider, like Cognito here. So now, what you can do is, okay, that one has also completed. So I think it's, where is it? This one. So now you can see I just deployed a sample CloudFormation stack. And if you go to what it has created, you can see what essentially it creates. So right now it only has a metadata file because we haven't provisioned anything. Now, when you all build Express apps, you all have used NodeMon, right? Hot reload, so when you save it, automatically compiles it, and then it serves the application again. So this is essentially like that. So if you control S it, it will redeploy everything on the cloud again. So that's pretty cool. So now open up a new folder called Auth and just create a file called resource.ts. So I'm gonna define this from scratch again. So what I'll do is I'll just comment this out just in case we want it as a reference. But you can again take all this on the documentation. So maybe we can do that. So if you head over to the documentation, you can go to your Gen2 doc. And next up, we want to add authentication, right? So simple as this. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be creating a function called auth, and that's going to have a function called define auth. That's from Amplify backend. And then what we're going to be doing is we are going to, let's say you want to log in. So how does the user want to log in with? So now we have email, right? So email, we have login with email, and then you can essentially, there are other parameters that you can configure, okay, but they haven't mentioned that. Okay, that's fine. So let's say I'll walk you through that rest. So email, login with, okay, why is it login with? Email alone is, I think, an object like this. Okay. So then what you can do is, so now the moment we have done this, we essentially tell Amplify we want to create an authentication service which lets users log in with email. Now, there are other parameters. So let's say that you want to talk about. Maybe we want to have a name for this. So let's say we have this as auth. So now we have, let's say, not auth. Okay. So that can be like the name of our identity service. And then you have other parameters here. Like if you want to log in with phone, that's with phone number and you get an OTP. So that's passwordless authentication. You can set that up as well. But for this, we'll just call email only and leave it like that. And then what you can do is you can talk about account recovery. So account recovery is if a user wants to, like, let's say, forget their password and they want to reset it, how do we want to let them do that? So now by default, it supports only, I believe, by default it switches to email only, but let's see what it does. Yeah, so by default, it goes with email only. So that's what we are going to be sticking with because you can implement it either way, but it will take a bit of time. So we'll leave it as a default parameter and let them resolve it so we don't have to worry about that. And if you again go through all of these attributes, so you have so that essentially tells who is able to access this particular user pool. So again, we don't want to configure all of that because the best part about Amplify is it does all of that for us. So we only do the bare minimum here and it goes through all of this for us. So now we have this setup, okay? Now, this is still not provisioned. So if you go here, it doesn't do anything. So now what we have to do is we have to essentially call this function here. So we have to bring auth and we have to import this auth module. So we have to import it like this. The moment we do this, it shows that there's a deployment in progress. So it automatically provisions it for us. And now it says it has detected a file change and it's validating all of the types checks that we have and it's building everything. And if we go back to this particular file, so this particular CloudFormation stack, if you reload it, you'll likely see an update in progress once it switches to a deployment in progress. So right now we won't see it, but once it has built everything, we'll be able to see it. Okay. Let's see. You all can follow along onto this particular step that I'm doing as well. Okay. So while that is ongoing, so now with this particular part, we have actually set up this identity provider component as well. So that's another step that we have done in our application. And next up, we'll take a look at building these two database tables. So to do that, it's very simple. You create another folder called data and create a resource. So essentially what I have done is I'm creating a schema, okay? So if you all have worked with Express, have you all used a library called Mongoose if you all have built MongoDB applications? So in that, what you are doing is you define a schema, right, with Mongoose. So this is essentially the same thing. So you have a schema. So essentially A is something, a resource that we import from Amplify backend. So just consider that as like Amplify then maybe. So a dot schema and we are defining all the tables. So all of this users is one table. Notes is another table, okay? So now you can define it in any way that you want. So, but I have a use ID, a profile owner. I'll walk you through what does that mean. A name, email, created at, and an updated at, and a profile picture. So profile picture is essentially the URL that's gonna be stored after we upload it to Azure S3 buckets. Okay. So with that, you have the identifier. So identifier is, again, remember I told you about the partition key? So partition key is essentially the primary key for your table. So we are just going to say every user is uniquely identified by the user ID. And profile owner. Now this is the interesting attribute. Now, as a user who is registered in the system, can I read your information? Like, would you like it if I'm able to read your information and you can read mine? So that's where this particular attribute comes in. So you can define authorization parameters and say allow owner. So by default, this will have CRUD operation. So this owner can perform create, read, update, and delete to their particular record, and this owner is identified with this attribute. So anywhere we say profile owner, that's where this table uniquely identifies it, saying this is this user only. So others can't access this, only this particular user can. So we haven't defined this. So this is all Amplify taking care of it behind the scenes. And then we have a notes schema again, right? So with notes, we have again an ID, title, description, created at, and an updated at. ID is essentially the primary key of the table, or the partition key is the ID. And again, owner can only perform CRUD operations on this. So you can't see my notes, I can't see your notes, you can't create notes on behalf of me, I can't create notes on behalf of you. That's how this works. So that's essentially it for database design, okay? That's all. And we'll get to this line a bit later. So now we are just going to define our database tables. And then what we are going to be doing is defining a schema. So now after we define the schema, we want to make sure that this particular schema, so now we have the client schema. So this particular schema, this particular type that I imported, that's what essentially AppSync uses to define its API. So we are going to call that and pass in our schema that we built just now. And with this, what it's going to do is it's going to create a schema for us, a data resource, and it's going to authorize this using the identity pool. So identity pool is essentially this particular service. So the moment we do that, AppSync and this IDP can talk to each other and be like, is this user properly authenticated? Does this user have permission to read? It takes care of all of that. So we don't need to have DWDD codes, we don't have to verify, we don't have to manually do anything. So that's that particular resource. So okay, now that change has gone. So what we can do is we can see what it has created for us. So now, okay. So now if you see this, now earlier we added a backend, we added the auth, and then we added the name of the resource as notes auth, right? So now do you see this particular notes auth has been created, and it has created a user pool for us, an app, a role, and it has done everything. And we can even view the identity provider now. So this is essentially the notes authentication service that we have. You can call this like an auth service. So if we have, if you go to user pools and if we go to this notes auth, we can see all of the users also who are registered in our service. It's as simple as that, okay? So it's as simple as that. So now we don't have any user, this is because this is a fresh user pool, but you can see users once the app is essentially live, you can see it. So that's how you define auth. And then now we have defined our data, right? We have everything. Now once you do this, this creates an AppSync API with GraphQL support as well. So now what we'll do is we'll provision this. So to provision this again, how do you do it? You have to call the data resource and just save it again. It's as simple as that, but okay, yeah. And then it'll again define a change and it'll deploy it for us. So you can do more things with this. So let's say you have particular functions. So that's where this comes in. So now we have a trigger, right? This trigger should be able to communicate with these tables. So that's where we have set up authorization, and we allow this particular post confirmation resource to access these tables. That's essentially that what we have done there. So if you all can define your schema, you all can define it in any way that you all want actually. It doesn't matter. You all can define, you all can like do your own thing and do what you want here. That's totally up to you. So it's still building and publishing of assets. Okay. Okay, so now there's a deployment going on now. So if we check our CloudFormation stack, we'll be able to. Okay, why is it not showing up still? Okay, it's still only going. Okay, that's all. Okay. So once it finishes, we'll be able to see our data resources being provisioned, and along with that, a GraphQL API. So I'll show you those two resources also. So until then, you all can connect up to this point with me. I'll just close this. So this is all that we have coded so far. This is all. So essentially, this identifier has two entries. So you can add another field if you want, and that is essentially your range, your the sort key that I talked about. So I don't want to do any sorting. I'm just going to have the use ID. There are more properties that you have. If you want to disable any particular operations, let's say you want prevent this people from anyone from deleting entries on this, then you can prevent the delete operation. Likewise, you can define what you want to do. Let's say you want to prevent people from listing this, you can do that also. But we're not going to do that because we want people to kind of interact with the database. But for this, we'll say once you create a database, once you create a node, you can't delete it. We'll just add that. So whatever you create, it belongs to me now. So you can just do that and say. So then we are going to deploy that again. So the deployment is still in progress. Let's see if it has anything. Okay. So now you can see it popped up here. So there's a create in progress. So essentially over here, it's going to create our data resource along with the API. So now we have everything that we have with the API related operations that are being created here. And we have the GraphQL API as well. So now let's see if we can check this out. GraphQL access policy is still in progress. Maybe we can check it. Okay. So the GraphQL has been provisioned for us. So now if you check your app sync, you will see an API provisioned for you. Okay, so let's see if we can. So this is our API right now. So if we check our schema, we should be able to see the schemas as well. Maybe it hasn't synced yet. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. So now do you see it has defined all of the GraphQL parameters that we will want. So it has the input and it has all of the inputs to delete a node. It has inputs to delete a user. It has everything that we would define manually already defined for us automatically. So we didn't code any of this. So if we actually build an AppSync API, we would have to write all of this from scratch. But in this case, we didn't do any of this. Amplify did it all for us. All we did was coded it out. That's pretty much it. And if you go back, you can see it is still creating all of the tables that we want and everything that we want. So if you check the data source, so by default, now it has mapped this also for us. So AppSync can automatically resolve to the tables now. So if you check the data sources, it has automatically taken our data sources as well. So that is something we didn't do at all. Uh, let's see if it has defined any functions for us. deploying. Okay, so it has defined all of the functions also that we will need to delete any operations or edit anything. So all of the query resolvers, it has provisioned for us. So I'm just walking you through this to show you that if you did this manually, these are the stuff that you would have to create. So you'd have to create 50 query resolvers. You'd have to create 3 data sources. You'd have to create an API. You'd have to define your schema. So we didn't do any of that. We just defined this particular, like, we just wrote 40 lines of code, right? It took care of all of that for us. So that's how convenient this particular framework is. So now we have the data source created as well. And then what we can do is, next up, we want to create a storage bucket for the users. So with this, they'll be able to upload image assets. So how do we do that? It's very straightforward again. You just have a storage folder. In that, you have a storage resource. Again, you would call your define storage function. So y'all can follow along to this code. And over here, what we have done is essentially allowed access again. So now, if you take, there's a profile pictures path, and we have an entity ID. So this entity ID is going to be essentially the user ID. And what we are going to be doing is allow guests to read. So that means you can view my profile picture, but only this particular entity can read, write, and delete. So by doing so, we are essentially creating authorization on the storage bucket to be like, only I can modify my profile picture. You guys can view my profile picture. So that's essentially that what we are doing here. Okay. So after you have defined your data and your storage, essentially bring it to the backend. And then what you can do is, you can just essentially call your storage module like this as well. If you import your storage, that will again cause a deployment, and it will sync up all of your changes. So that's going to take around maybe 1-2 minutes ideally, and that will provision your storage bucket and everything you want. So far we have created Amplify to authenticate with your IDP. We have Amplify to invoke an API which will resolve to your tables. And we have Amplify which will talk to your storage account as well. S3 bucket. Okay. And then we have the post confirmation Lambda. This is something that we'll get to now. So right now, why don't you all take a few minutes to kind of sync up to where I am? If you all want to see the code, you all can again ask me. I'll just show you all the files that you want. So I think where most of you all are following along. So next up, we'll then take a look at storage again. So storage, have you all implemented storage as well? So I think everyone has, ones who are following along have actually adopted, built your storage data and your auth. So next up, we'll add the storage module. So again, name, define storage, and similar to your data, you're going to have like an authorization setup. So for that particular path, we are going to have to read, and the others or any authenticated user, myself, can only do create, read, and updates. Okay. Uh, are you all there, guys? All good? Okay. So, allow guests is any unauthenticated user. Allow entities any authenticated user. That's what we are going to be allowing now. So afterwards, add your storage module here, and we can check out our storage module right about now. So I think now it's high time that it be deployed. So let's refresh it and see. So we have right now the storage module deployed. So now you can see that we have a custom storage module, and we have created everything. Okay, this is the storage. So we have the bucket, and we have a bucket policy. So the bucket policy is essentially this what we defined right now. In the storage, we defined this particular condition. So that's what we call as the bucket policy. So if you want, I'll show you the storage bucket and the bucket policy that we have set up. So let's see. Okay. So if we go to permissions, we can see the bucket policy here. So now this is essentially what we wrote here. So essentially those two lines translated to this particular JSON policy. That's pretty cool, right? So next up, we just have one more component. We just have this one and our API is done. So next we have the triggers. So how you define a Lambda is inside this triggers folder or functions, whatever you want to call it, have the name of the function. That's the next folder. Okay, so you need to create a folder called functions. Inside that, have another folder for the name of your function. And then have a handler and a resource. Okay, so the resource essentially says, like define storage, we have another function called define function. That's essentially it, okay? And give the name of the function, that's it. By default, what it does is, we already have a file called handler, right? So if you check this out, and if you say the entry, now, the entry, it defaults to .handler.ts. So what is this particular file? So because it defaults to handler.ts, we have defined the handler.ts here, right? So we don't have to again define the entry file because by default we have set up the folder structure to automatically point to this. So that way we avoid writing one more line of code. So if you are lazy, this is the best way to go. If not, if you want to have a separate folder for handlers, you can essentially be you want to take the lazy approach, go ahead and have this set up. That is pretty straightforward. So you just define the function with the name. That's it. And the handler is where your business logic lies. So again, very straightforward, guys. So you have a handler function with the post confirmation type. So the moment you add this type, you get all of this autocomplete. That's the best part. So now what we are doing is we are getting the user's email by accessing the user attributes and the email. So I'll show you this. So if we want, we can just add a simple file called console.log and we'll log the entire event, okay? So we can inspect the code. So then we want the user ID. So generally as industry standards, users IDs are always coming in an attribute called sub. I don't know if you have seen JWT tokens, but if you decode a JWT token, you'll see a parameter called sub. That's where your user ID will come from. So any JWT token in the world, any authentication service will by default use sub to note an ID down. So if you are working with any third-party APIs, so here do you see this? See this particular parameter called sub. So sub is by default industry accepted standards to define an ID. Pretty straightforward there. So now we just get the sub for the user ID. And since we are creating this from scratch, now generally you don't need to add this field, but because you're manually creating it, you have to define the profile owner here. Now, this is an AWS convention which I also learned. So the profile owner attribute is always defined in the user ID and dash dash, oh sorry, colon colon and the user name. This is something that AWS maintains from their side to define the owner attribute, which I also got to know recently. So this is just a convention. So this is something you have to follow. So this is not something I did just for the fun of it, but this is something you always have to follow. It's always a combination of user ID and username. So we get these three variables and look how simple it is, okay? So we get a client from the schema that we have created, and then we go to the models, we get the user model, and we create a user. Just simple as that. And we just pass in the parameters that we want, okay? So pretty straightforward. And we have created a user, and we just return the event because that's AWS native, again, how it works. And there are a few lines of code which I'll walk you through here. So amplify configure. What that does is you need some kind of environment variables to provide to amplify to this function. So we didn't tell what name of the function and what environment variables to use, right? So you have to add this particular function. This is again straight from the documentation. I didn't write this from scratch. Just add this particular line and these two lines, and that will configure your function to use the amplify environment. This is something you have to do when you're working with functions because you need to provide runtime information to the function, but the rest business logic is up to you. So now if you want, if you can, I'll add this on maybe a QR code. So if you all can scan this, you all will be taken directly to my GitHub repository, okay? So just scan this if you can, and that will take you directly to my GitHub. So rather than writing all this code out, it's already there. So you can just scan this QR if you have a camera, or you can take a picture of the QR for later reference also. Uh, all good with the QR? Okay, all scanned. Okay, cool. So next up, we have done the users and we have created the users. Now we need to add it to our table. So essentially, sorry, we have added it, right? I believe. So we we have given permission to invoke. Okay, now we just need to add the post confirmation trigger. So if we go to triggers, you have this post confirmation, right? So now what we can do is we can just import our post confirmation from the particular resource. So from this particular resource we can import it. But now it's giving me no value exists. Okay, I think it's because I imported it from triggers, post confirmation, resource. Okay. So now we have hooked up the post confirmation trigger to our Cognito identity provider. So that's essentially backend done actually. Yeah, backend is done, right? So we have provision this, we have this, we have this. So if we really take it into account, we can build this in under 15 minutes. Maximum it'll take you 20 minutes to build this from scratch. So we had a lot of time in deploying, and we spent a bunch of time syncing up on code, but ideally it takes only like 5 minutes. Maximum, I would say 15 to 20. If you are doing this for the first time, 15 to 20. Once you get the hang of it, 5 minutes max, guys. So we'll just let that deploy. And next, we are ready to move on to the front end now. So I don't have enough network to create a project, so I'll have to use my existing project. So you all will have to follow along with me. Like you all, but I use pages, but I'll show you how to do this in AppRouter as well. So those who have created the project in AppRouter, go ahead and create 3 routes or 3 folders on your app for login, sign up, verify, email, and home. Index will be your app.tsx. So that will be your root layout and page.tsx. So you go ahead and create a home route, login route, sign up route, verify email route. So that will be like 4 folders. Okay, I have a marker here. I can write it here then. So if you all are using app, it will look something like this, I believe. So you have your root.tsx and you have your layout. Don't remember this exactly, but it should be like this. So you will have to have another folder structure like home and another one called login. And inside that, you will need to create 2 more files. So I'll link everything onto this. So you have your layout.tsx, and I believe it's root. I don't remember this exactly, but am I right or wrong there? Won't remember that exactly. So layouts and pages. So you have the page. So this is the page router, right? Layout.tsx, and the other one is page, right? Okay, so you need page. So it's layout and page. So layout and page here. So just go ahead and create those files. So the folders are exact. All right, thank you. So we don't need to do anything to the layout file. We can directly work with the page. So layout, because we are just going to be using the root setup. We are not going to touch anything on the layouts for that particular file. So just go ahead and create that structure, guys. Yeah. And for those who created it in app router, make sure you have client-side routing, because these API calls will or might fail if you're running it on server. So use client. That's important. So before you start any programming, before you start any file, on top, just declare it as use client. So that will use client-side routing and not use Next.js server at all. So just all right. Okay. So backend backend is all done. So backend, there's nothing to do actually there. You can close this particular backend file now. Next up, so first of all, we'll start with the sign up. So sign up is pretty simple. So I just have a straightforward form and just have like first name, last name, email, password, and my confirm password. And I have essentially text fields with MUI defined here. So it would be best right now if you all can check out my GitHub repo because coding this out will take hours. So make sure you all get my GitHub to do this part. Now, to sign up, again, you just have Amplify Auth sign up function here. To sign up, you just call that particular function. So yeah, go to our, so I'll open my local server as well. So now what I'll do is I'll just run npm run dev. So we'll head over to localhost 3000. And let's go to sign up. So this is essentially what my form looks like. So I have all of the fields that I talked about here. First name, last name, email, password, and confirm password. So just call in this particular sign up function on your submit handler and pass in the parameters. And now you don't have any place to particularly store the first name, last name when you're signing up through Cognito. That is why Cognito has a thing called user attributes. So user attributes, again, these are industry accepted conventions. So any authentication system you will use in your entire life will have a set of defined attributes. So you have given name will always be your first name. Family name will always be your last name. So remember that because those are industry-wide known variables for you all. So you have more. So you have stuff like address, birth date, gender, local. So local is essentially which particular language are you familiar with. So is it English, Sinhalese, German, or whatever. Phone number, nickname, picture, preferred username, etc. So the list goes on. So make sure you all send in the right attributes. That's really important. Because if not, you are not following right API conventions, and people who might use your API in the future will adhere to those standards, and they might not get the information they're expecting. Afterwards, so after a user signs up, we want them to verify their email, right? Because you want to make sure that the email they entered works. So to do that, so after they sign up, I send them to this verify email route. And from there, I have this. So again, what I essentially do is user will get an OTP. So I have the email and the confirmation code, which is the OTP. The moment I do that, sign up is completed. Then this trigger is invoked. That's what happens. So I don't control any of that. I'll just show you how that works. So if let's go ahead, I'm going to create an account again. So login plus one. Okay, so I'm going to sign up. And when I sign up, I'll be taken to the verify email page. So when I head over to the verify, so now, did we create any emails? Did we create an email service? We didn't create any email service, right? Now the best part is this. It already created an email and it sent it to me also. We didn't configure this at all, right? We didn't create any OTP. We didn't do anything, right? So all of this is handled from Amplify and Cognito. So yeah, usually we'd have to implement this kind of verification. Now, did I define a logic where how it's supposed to generate the OTP? Nothing. So I just copy it and where's my site? I'll just head over, paste the OTP. Now, did I add a logic to validate my OTP? Check if it's right or wrong. So let's see if it works. So things plus 100. And you see, it directly talks to Cognito. I don't do anything, right? So now, if I go to my user pool, if I refresh, there, I'm there already. I'm a confirmed user. Done. So we just, so UI, you can build it in any way you want. The whole point of this session was to show you how simple it is to create a production ready application, right? Really easy, really easy. And then next up, let's say you want to log in. Did I add a, did I, okay, we'll go to login component. I'll show you how that works. It's pretty cool. So again, sign in. We have this function from Amplify, pass in the email and the password. Done. Now, did I add a validation to check if the password is correct? So if I do pass100 at Gmail, I'm just going to enter random nonsense now, and I'm going to send it. So it's going to give me a login failed. And if I take a look at why, okay, those days they used to send it, but now they don't, which is really good. So those days they used to send if it is invalid password, but now they have taken it off. So that's pretty good. So essentially my password is incorrect. If I enter the right password now, I'm going to be taken to home. There, done. So login is working now. So UI, I'm not going to be, jumping heavily into how I did the UI, but because UI, you can design it any way you see fit. So this might be a very basic UI. So next up, I have, so now users is done, right? So now we essentially, now if we go to Lambda, do you remember we added, essentially we added a console.log here on the handler. So I'll show you how that looks, the entire payload. So if we can find this, this one, post confirmation Lambda 9 minutes ago. So this is the one. So if we go to the logs, and if we go to the user pool, actually I'll show you that first. So if we go here and overview, I believe it's where it's at. Let's see if you can find where the triggers are. App clients, no. Interesting. Sign in. See, this is, you are so used to infrastructure, you code it out, you don't really know where it is located in the actual AWS console. Do you know where triggers is, Cognito? I don't remember where it is now. Because we always code it out, we never find it on this particular part here. Maybe, okay, no, not here. Maybe we can search for it, I don't know. Let's see if we can search for it. Could be on extension, here, it's on extensions, okay. Extension, so that's the Lambda trigger that we set up. So, and then we have the essentially the code. So don't think about the code because it is minified. So if you go through this code, it'll drive you crazy. So just don't look at the code which it deploys because it'll minify it onto JS and then deploy it. It won't directly deploy TypeScript. So if we go to the logs, we can see the event that we just printed out, right? So this user attributes is very long, so that's why it just sends us an object here. But if not, it'll directly give us all the information. So that's pretty useful. So now we have a Lambda. I'm going to get rid of the console log because generally we don't leave that in production. So we're going to leave that out. And now we're going to take a look at the notes section, how we did it. So we go to the home page. Now, to get the notes, I have a component called, I believe it's called, so where do I set the notes? Okay, here. So now, I have a notes model where I list everything. So here I don't necessarily do any GraphQL queries, I just list it. So when you list, essentially it scans everything, and I'm gonna get 100 at a time, and authentication mode is through the user pool. So when I do that, that integration I told you, Amplify, so AppSync checking Cognito, that happens. And I'm gonna get my notes. So this particular single line translates to an API query. So if you take a look at the query now, so you can see it on the network tab actually. So I'll show you how the query looks. So all of these GraphQL calls. Here, variables limit 100, and it's gonna list nodes. See, it's gonna take title, ID, description, created, updated, owner, and the next token. We didn't write this. We just wrote that particular single function. If not, so back in those days, before we had tools to kind of automate this, we used to write all of this from scratch, the entire GraphQL query. So we don't need to write queries, mutations anymore. They do it all for us. So that's that query. And when you do a new, what it does is, essentially, where's my create function? Handle new. Okay, no. This one. Else, this part here. Again, where we create a note, we don't pass the profile owner. That is defined automatically, like I said, when we use this auth mode as user pool. So we pass in title, description, and the timestamps. So let's create a note. So that's gonna do a mutation, right? So anything to insert stuff, it does a mutation. So now you see the mutation query it has sent, done. And now, so variables, input, so it hasn't passed in the owner. That's pretty cool. So now if you check DynamoDB, go to the users, you can see the user that we just created. If you go to explore table items, that's the user. There. That's the user we just created. And if you go to the notes, that's the note we just created, right? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open another account on this. I'm gonna go to incognito and I'm gonna create another account, okay? Just to demonstrate that authorization logic we set up. Okay, so now first 101. We're gonna verify it and then we are gonna log in. The moment I log in, I won't see the other person's notes now. So that's authentication and authorization done. That's because this particular user has not created that resource, so they can't read it. And that is defined all using this particular line that we have created here. This particular authorization for allow owner. If the moment I change this, I'll show you. The moment I change this to allow authenticated, this condition changes in a way that any authenticated user can view any node in the system. So we'll change that and see. So now it's again deploying it in real time for us. And it's actually doing that in real time. So we just saved it. So usually if you had to do this, you get all the nodes, you query it by the user ID, and then you have to remove that user ID so that any authenticated user can do it. We don't do that stuff here anymore. It's just single lines of code. So this goes into a segment called low code platform. So Amplify Gen 2 is essentially similar to a low code platform because you do everything with minimal lines of code. So it's not into the no code spectrum, but more into the low code spectrum. We'll just let that deploy and see how that looks. Okay. We'll wait for a minute until it builds. Until it deploys, what we'll do is we'll check out the navbar. So the navbar is very interesting because what I've done here is I have a component called navbar. So over here, I have an input file type, okay? Where is it? Input file type. So that's gonna be an input which will accept a file. So I have a file change event defined and I have a function. So if they have uploaded a file, it's going to invoke a function called handle file. So handle file is it's going to, if you drag and drop, or if you select the file, it's going to go there. So now, do you remember we defined the path earlier, entity ID and the star? Now we are talking to that particular path. Upload data, again coming from Amplify, and we are going to upload it to that particular path we defined. We are going to get the data file. So the data is essentially the blob that we just took and the content type of the file. The moment we do that, Amplify just talks to S3 and be like, here's the upload file. Just upload it and keep it with you. So let's see if this has been deployed now. It's deploying still. Okay. That's essentially how to upload files also. It's very straightforward. So now what I have done is I have awaited this. So if you all are familiar with async await, now it blocks anything from further happening. But you can do this in a way, rather than having this result here, you can actually add another param here. I forgot where do you define it, but I believe it's somewhere here. You can get the on progress event. So when you do that, you can create progress bars. Yeah, exactly. So you can do essentially if you add the progress. So it should event should not work like that, but total price divided by. So essentially you get apparently if you check what transfer price and the total price. So using these two variables, you can define a percentage on your own, right? So total transferred bytes divided by total bytes into 100. That gives you a percentage of what's done. So with that, you can create a loading bar. Simple as that. So you can use this. You can use this. It's very, very cool. So it's very straightforward. So what I was just lazy to build that part. So I just did await there. So and just added that whole part there. But it's up to you. It's very fun. It's very fun once you start using it. So you can add the progress also. So if you thought progress wasn't supported, progress is definitely supported there. So and then let's say this particular task, right? You have three more functions: cancel, pause, resume. So let's say if you take this at face value, and if you get this particular function, so this particular upload function, and if you this is gonna be null. So this particular event, if you add it to a state file, if you get rid of this upload data, so from here, let's say the user wants to cancel the update. So all you do is upload response. Okay, that's because I'm inside this. So upload response dot. You just call cancel there. That's if the user wants to cancel. So if you're uploading, let's say a 4K file, you want to cancel it, you have a cancel button. This cancels it, and you have the progress to say how much is left and how much is ongoing. That's pretty. You can build features like that as well. So it's not just basic drag and drop support that you have. You have everything there, right? So let's see if our, okay, it's deployed. So the moment I reload this, I should be able to see that other person's note now. I see it now. So I see both ends. So if I go here and if I create a new note, note created from new user, new user's note, it saves it. Then if I reload this part, I'll be able to see that note as well. So just like that, you were able to break your authentication with a single line. So all you have to do is, rather than having allow authenticator, allow the owner to do it. When you do that, that switches to the profile owner attribute and it filters out the data like that. So that's cool. Now we took a look at that all of the particular application components are covered. So now, next you might ask, how do you delete this stuff? So front end is nothing to delete because we didn't necessarily do anything. You can stop the compiling from happening. And for this, you can just run npx amplify sandbox delete. That will delete all of the resources that you provision in your sandbox. Now keep in mind, you don't pay for any of this. So all of these resources that you just provisioned are covered in your free tier. So it's, even if you do end up paying, you would pay at max $5-6 a month for the entire production application. And this application on its own can handle one user today, a million tomorrow, 10 million day after, scale up to about 100 million. It still works because you don't have to worry about scaling. Lambda can scale up. So all of these functions, so GraphQL or AppSync can essentially scale up from one request to about 100 million odd requests within a couple of seconds. Lambda can scale up from one instance to about 40,000 in a second and 400,000 in the next 5 to 6 seconds. So it's very scalable in nature. So you don't have any performance bottlenecks. So lastly, I want to talk to you about deploying this. So now we have an application. We tested it locally. Everything works. So now head over to your AWS Amplify console. Okay. Now, for some reason, US East 1 does not work for me when I deploy. I run into an error always. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to Mumbai because Mumbai seems to be the one that always works for me when I do it. Amplify, I just get a random error from this thing from the Amplify saying some role is missing. So I'm going to create a new app on Amplify, and my code is in my GitHub. Okay, I'm going to go to GitHub and get the code. So it's going to go to my GitHub, ask me to authorize my GitHub, and once you finish the entire authentication flow, it will redirect you back, and then add the repository that you want. So next up, Amplify, that's the repo that I hosted it on. So it's essentially this repo that I'm pointing to. So then my branch is the main branch where all my code lives. And I'm going to click next. So it automatically detected Amplify Gen 2 and Next.js. I don't have to write any build file from scratch. So create and use a new service role, that's fine. So service role is essentially, now you created an IAM role for admin access. Likewise, Amplify needs another role to deploy these services on using CloudFormation. So now it's deploying it. So if you go to your deployments, you can see that it's deploying, and if you go to your deployment history and you can leave, you can see this. If you expand this, you can see the build. Simple, really simple. So now it takes care of that. It automatically creates a domain name for you, published to the public internet, and you can password protect your site. You can add firewall rules. So let's say you want to restrict your application to be only accessible from this particular IP address. You can do that. IP range, you can. Country, you can. Bot detection, it allows protection for that. So full secure. I'll walk you through how to set all of that up once we get into this deploy. So the first deployment phase takes about 10 minutes because it has to provision all of those same resources that we just did. But until then, until it deploys, I'll walk you through all of what I told you. So hosting, access control. Now, say you have development, staging, production environment. Production should be accessible to all users, right? But do you want your dev environment to be accessible to everyone? It can contain bugs, it can contain new features you're working on. So what you can do is manage access, restricted. So I'm gonna have like demo day, and then password will be the same, right? Okay. And that's access. So now anything that's deployed off the main branch will be password required. Other branches won't. Next up, let's say you have a custom domain that you want to talk to. So right now I don't have a custom domain purchased in order to show this. But what you can do is you can add a domain and enter your domain name. That will configure it all automatically for you. You just need to add a CNAME record onto your domain. Simple as that, it'll do it for you. Environment, you don't need to think about that because we're not dealing with it. This is what I want to talk to you about firewall, okay? Now, when you talk about firewall, so Amplify will automatically enable most recommended protection which are found in common web applications. So have you heard of OWASP? So OWASP top 10, it will protect you from that, and it will protect you from malicious and block IP addresses that are known to be vulnerable. So there are certain IP addresses which people use specifically for these type of attacks. So if it is a bot attack, it originates from a specific IP range. It's, I don't know, like any L7 layer attack, this will detect it for you, a layer 7 attack. Next, you want to restrict access to amplify.app.com. So next, so this one you can leave it ticked to unticked, it's up to you. So again, if you have IP address protection, so that says if you block an IP here, if you list out all of the IPv4s that are blocked, any request originating from that will not be allowed through your firewall. And country protection. So let's say I want to have blocked, I want to block access to Sri Lanka. So anything that I access from Sri Lanka will be blocked. So keep in mind, this is not free. WAF will be charged $9 per month, plus $1.4 for 1 million requests per month, plus it will charge you $15 per month to keep all of this up for you. So that's a total of 15, 23, and this is at around $2-ish, because that's if you have 1 million requests per month. So around $20-ish you will have to pay if you enable this service. So I already have this up on one particular app of mine. So I'll just show you how this works. So until this deploys, what we'll do is we'll go to Amplify, okay? And we'll go to AP South 1, that's Mumbai. And let's say I want to restrict access to Sri Lanka, okay? I'm gonna go to hosting, I'm gonna go to firewall, I'm gonna manage firewall settings, I'm gonna block Sri Lanka now. Earlier I had allowed Sri Lanka. So now what I do, what will happen is if I take my particular hosting URL and go, okay, it takes a while to load, I guess. Let's see if it has applied. Edit firewall settings. Am I on VPN? I don't think so. So let's see, maybe it takes a while to apply. It should definitely take a few to apply. So maybe now it's active. Usually it takes about a minute or two to kind of propagate all of your settings to AWS WAF. But we'll see if it has provisioned now. I think it was blocked. Yeah. So now I'm getting an error saying request blocked, we couldn't connect to the server. So that's using CloudFront WAF rules. So now if I go ahead and let's say I want to enable access back to Sri Lanka, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my hosting, firewall, edit firewall, and I'm going to allow Sri Lanka now. It will take about a minute because it will need to propagate all of your rules to the CloudFront. So CloudFront is like a CDN, so that's where all of your WAF rules are being attached onto. Maybe now, okay, I don't think it's still propagated, but let's see. So while this is being deployed, let's go to our apps. So this is still deploying. Let's take a look at the branch. It's still provisioning everything for us. It's still doing. So now you see it's provisioning all the lambdas for us, right? It's doing everything that we did earlier using the sandbox. And it's just going on and on. So now this side should work in a bit, I suppose. Yeah, now it's working. So now the WAF rules have been applied again, and now I have access back to my environment. That's how that works. Okay. So now once this is deployed, it will automatically publish a DNS entry. So this is already the published DNS entry for us. So we can, ideally the front end should be up by now. So now the password that we want, so I'm going to put demo day. I'm going to sign in. My password seems to be wrong. Okay. Maybe I need to wait until it's deployed, so we'll just wait until it finishes then. Yeah. Oh, the password is working. So I entered the wrong password earlier. So now Amplify is still deploying. So once it deploys, we'll see our application right here on this particular domain. So .amplifyapp.com. So now we'll just see, we'll wait until this deploys. It'll take another few minutes. Yeah, it's still going on. Backend is still, so you can see once you deploy everything, it'll pop up right here on your backend resources. Yeah. So you don't need to have a back deploy onto Amplify. Let's say you want to deploy a portfolio of yours, just upload it to GitHub, do the same thing, it'll work. Even if it's just a simple React app, you can just do it. It's not a problem at all. So any basic app that you have built, let's say you have built a portfolio app or a simple index file, you can just host it on Amplify. You don't need to have the entire backend that I told you about. So the backend is optional. So front end only works as well. So now the backend resources have been deployed. Maybe if I reload this, it might pop the site up. Yeah, that's our site now. So essentially, it's the same app that we did, but now it's available for anyone on the internet as well. This is not restricted on a firewall, so anyone globally can access this. So that's pretty much it. So I think since we didn't cover most of the front end part, it would be better if you guys can copy the URL or note down the QR for my GitHub repo so that you all can have it as a point of reference. So it's a public GitHub repo. So just at the what do you call it, at the QR and just save this repo for your reference as well. And you can build on top of this. So let's say if you want to actually use this as inspiration, just go ahead and take it. It's licensed out to MIT, so you can have it for any purpose as well. It's open source for anyone who is willing to use it. Yeah. That's pretty much it for my demo actually. So again, I've left the QR here. So I said thank you, and if you have any questions, I'm open to answering any questions that you might have. One thing I did not add, Amplify has support for AI services. So if you want to build like a chatbot, a conversational AI, it's just 5 or 6 lines of code maximum. So if you check out AI toolkit, so conversation AI, so you can build something like this in like a fraction of effort, like maybe it will take like 30 minutes max. So it all takes, so it's essentially this particular component. Nothing else, right? That's all. You just need to handle this part. And this component is default by design when you use this AI conversation toolkit app. That's pretty much it. Yeah. What do you mean? Yeah. Only for chat. Yeah. So if you add this, huh? Only you can, yeah. Yeah, you can. So this supports external association. This handles send message. So if you use this handle send message, so essentially you need to just hook that up to an API, right? He knows better about this AI because he's actually doing it on a project of his. So you can essentially use this stuff and build real-time chat conversations as well. And if you want real-time APIs, GraphQL has, AppSync has support for PubSub or like sockets as well. So you can build AI conversations using this. Just go through the documentation. It's actually all you need. You don't need anything else for this. Any other questions?
We want to express our heartfelt gratitude to everyone who made today's session a success one. First and foremost, a huge round of applause for our exceptional speakers, Mr. Lakidu Hewavasan and Mr. Chamira Dulanga, for sharing their invaluable expertise and inspiring us all with their cloud mastery. Our sincere appreciation goes to AWS Sri Lanka for their partnership and continued support in empowering in Sri Lanka's next generation of cloud professionals, and extend our gratitude to the IEEE Computer Society student branch chapter of University of Sri Jayawardenepura for their outstanding organization and dedication for fostering technological excellence. And most importantly, thank you to each and every participant, both virtual and in person, for your enthusiasm, engagement, and for making this community vibrant and dynamic. You didn't just attend a workshop today. You gained cloud superpowers. Remember, this is just the beginning of the beauty of cloud journey. Take today's spark, build tomorrow's inferno. Stay connected, stay curious, and keep your heads in the clouds. Until next time, deploy your dreams. Thank you.